Welcome or welcome back to Running Strong. Today we're going to talk about progressing your workouts week over week. My name is Will Frantz. I'm a running coach and a strength coach, and my goal with this podcast, as with all the information I put online, is to help you train a little better so you can improve your performance, whatever that may mean for you. Whether you're looking to get a little faster or run a little longer or get through an injury, I want to help just like I try to help the people I coach. If you enjoy the podcast, I'd appreciate you hitting subscribe or follow or whatever button tells your favorite podcast platform that you want more of it week after week. It helps a lot, probably more than I even recognize as someone who's just not very good with technology. Before we get into the main topic, I want to reiterate something I've said in the past. I've had a couple conversations over the past week or two. I don't know. Time has no meaning. And it's just that you should probably care about your training more than the goal in many ways. I realize, not entirely. Obviously, the goal is the target. The goal is the thing that can give the purpose to the training. But what I mean by this is, you're going to spend so much more time training than you're going to be doing, actually doing whatever event you're training for. So you should probably enjoy the training, or at least most of it. There will usually be some part of training that you don't necessarily love, and if you're going to see improvements, and if you're going to see some improvements that might need to happen, right? But it does mean that we should enjoy most of it. When it comes to these things we don't like, for example, if you're struggling with IT band shit because your gluteus medius is weak, then you need to do strength training to make that thing stronger, no matter how much you hate strength training, or else your IT band is going to continue to hurt and your running is going to continue to suck, right? But most of the training should be stuff you enjoy. If it isn't, then we should find something else to do. If you're training for a Spartan race, then you have to do a bunch of these tests that make you get better at all the obstacles in the Spartan race. And if you don't like doing the things that entails, like burpees and pull-ups and rope pulls and etc., if you don't like those things, then don't do Spartan races, right? If we're doing things week after week, day after day, that we don't enjoy doing because we had this idea that we needed to do this event, then that just seems silly. It seems like we're torturing ourselves. If you decide you want to do a 100-miler and you look at some training plans for a 100-miler and all you can think is wow, that's just so much running, then maybe don't do that event because, yeah, it is a lot of running. It takes a lot of running to do well on a 100-miler and mitigate your risk for injury. Same with a mountain race. If you want to do one of these big races in the mountains with a lot of climb and a lot of descent, and you live in a flat area and you'd rather die than do treadmill work once or twice a week, then maybe you don't want to do that mountain race because not only yes, the speed carries over, fitness is fitness, but there is something to be said for the fact that climbing does put a different stress on your body, and you're increasing your risk for injury if we aren't able to train for it, or at the very least that you're going to hike most of those hills, and your knees might hurt on the downs. So, training is where you're going to spend the majority of your time. If you don't like the training required to do the thing that you want to do, then you're basically signing up to have a miserable few months in order to pursue a goal that after those miserable few months, you might be burnt out before you even get to do that goal. So try to pick things. I think we should try to pick things, pick targets, pick goals, pick objectives that actually foster a life experience that we want to have. And that is where I think we should really try to find our events. Pick the events that have a weekly training cycle that makes you happy, that will actually get you stoked to get out the door and do the thing that will help you do better at that event. So on that note, let's look at some workouts and how we can progress them. We're thinking about workouts, and I don't mean workouts as in the general term, or is it any time you go do the gym or whatever. I mean like workout Wednesday workouts, like speed workouts, speed work. So if we're doing workouts, you're more or less going to do the same thing over and over and over again and different intensities, right? Sure, things will shuffle throughout the year. Different things will become higher and lower priorities. They may look a little different. You may run 400s versus 600s, etc. We're going to just like shuffle the sliders a little bit on that equalizer board of training. But at the end of the day, there aren't that many things that you're trying to achieve when it comes to training. And there aren't that many workouts, at least big old baskets of workouts that we're really pulling from. It's either going to be short, really fast, like pure speed stuff. Think like 1 minute repeats. Or it might be short, fast, like VO2 stuff. A little longer than the 1 minute repeats, but still pretty short and just with purpose of cranking your heart rate through the roof. Or it might be slightly longer lactate stuff. Or something like pace intervals. Or like long, slow distance kind of thing, zone 1, zone 2. And those are most of the buckets we're really trying to achieve with training. And there are probably 1,000 different ways to achieve those goals, but those are the big targets. And I'm probably missing one, and I apologize if your favorite workout wasn't in there, but those are the big buckets that most people train in. Now, for some of those things, you won't do specific workouts, or you just don't need to think about it that much, right? Like zone 1, zone 2 work, figure out basically what your effort target is, and then just put in as much volume as you can really tolerate, both from a schedule and recovery standpoint. And we're going to get better at that aerobic fitness aspect. And then for some of them, we absolutely will really want to focus and target different things. If a workout goes well, you will want to know how to progress it to get a little more out of it the following week. So we should figure out easy ways to progress workouts, or at least think about progressing workouts. One very obvious option is to make it longer. And this could be longer distance or longer time. At the end of the day, it's the same thing. Your body doesn't know how far something is. It just knows how long you're doing it. So whenever we do something by distance, it's in some ways a large proxy for time anyway. So we can run a 6-minute interval, like lactate interval 1 week, and then we might run an 8-minute the next week. Or we might run a 600 at some pace 1 week, and then an 800 at the same pace next week. And I fall in this trap as much as anybody, but it also doesn't need to be even, right? You can do 7-minute intervals. That's fine. It doesn't need to go from 6 to 8. It doesn't need to be these multiples of 5 and 2. So we can make it longer. That is one of the biggest or easiest ways we can add on some difficulty. Now, depending on whatever the interval is, a full minute jump may be unreasonable. Like if you're doing 1-minute repeats and you jump to 2-minute repeats, you have to realize that is a 100% increase in training volume or intensity, however you want to think about it, right? So we either need to drop the sets, or what would probably be better is to maybe increase it by less. I realize 30 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but if you were running a minute long at a whatever pace, a 90-second interval is actually a massive increase proportionally. So think about exactly what we're increasing from before we go, before it gets ridiculous and you just can't handle it. Another way that we can progress workouts would be to reduce the rest, right? Like if we're doing these interval pieces, you should have rest periods. That's kind of the point. And we can shorten the time or the distance between these intervals. We could also shorten the time between sets of intervals if your workouts are that complicated. But if we're doing something like 200 on, 200 off, then we could do 200 on, 100 off. Or if we're doing 3-minute, or if we're doing lactate intervals and your rest period is If the work interval is like 8 minutes and your rest period's 3 minutes, you could make it 2 minutes. This would be an easy way to progress the interval. You get a little shorter recovery time. You still do want to recover in that recovery zone, at least mostly. But if we're starting to get to the point where 3 minutes just feels excessive, or we don't really want to push too much longer than whatever amount of time, we can just reduce the recovery a little bit and force the body to get better at recovering in a shorter period of time. Now, we could also go faster, right? This feels like a really simple one that most people try to do. Most people try to go faster every week, whether or not that's reasonable. But this could apply to either the recovery or the work interval, right? So if we have, again, like 200 on, 200 off, you could try to increase that 200 on speed, or you could increase the 200 off speed to something like, say you were walking them, you jog them. Say you were jogging them, maybe you do a ultra marathon pace. Say you were doing that, maybe you push to a marathon pace. You can increase the intensity on either interval, and it will make the workout harder. We could also add some incline, right? Like this is a thing I really like to do for lactate intervals, especially for people who are running mountain races. So instead of hammering on at this 10K pace, which is fine, really valid stimulus, especially if we're doing shorter, flatter races. But if you're doing trail stuff, for example, and there are a lot of hills, or if, like me, your knees aren't exactly at their factory settings, then maybe you don't want the impact stress every time you try to get a cardio stimulus. So doing stuff on an incline is a really good way to do that, because it reduces a lot of the impact on your joints. And yet we can still crank your heart rate up and get a massive stimulus to improve lactate clearance. So you might put the work interval on an incline, and then you might put the rest intervals at the same pace on flat or less of an incline. And this is a great way to both change the stimulus, change your running a little bit, take a little stress off of certain tissues, and still increase the stimulus in some way. We can also combine workouts, and this is a little more advanced, but it can be really helpful. So maybe you'll do 10 minutes on at a whatever pace, like 10 minutes on at a 10K pace, and then you'll do a couple intervals of that. And then you might do 5 minutes at a 5K pace and do a couple intervals of that. And this is more advanced. This is not a thing I actually program very often, but it can be a great stimulus, and it can be a great way to teach your body to work in different mechanisms. Also, for something like the one I just mentioned, right? Like a 5K is often limited, at least largely, by VO2 max. If you do some lactate intervals first, you'll be a little more primed to get there faster. So a lot of the time when we do VO2 max stuff, the first half of the interval is you just getting your heart rate up, especially in the first couple intervals. If we do some lactate stuff first, then the VO2 max stuff, we might get a more total volume with less overall time. Now, finally, you don't actually have to do any of these things. You can run the same workout again with the same targets and just see if it feels easier, right? Like that would be a perfect way to progress your workout, or a perfect way to assess progression, I guess, of your fitness is more accurate. If you ran something at an 8-minute pace one week and it felt like an 8 out of 10, and then the next week you come back and you run something at an 8-minute pace and it feels like a 7 out of 10, then, oh look, you got better because it was easier to do the same work. The same is true for weightlifting, right? Like I did deadlifts yesterday, and I was having someone help me a little bit with my form, because it's hard when you're by yourself and just with a camera, you don't get to see all the angles. So I had one of my coworkers look at me doing this, and I didn't set a PR I matched my old PR, but it was a lot easier than the last time I did it. So I made progress, right? And that is a really valid way to assess your training and see how you do. And if we're doing these if we're doing some kind of running workout week over week, if it feels really good at the end and it was supposed to be like a difficult stimulus, then we should make it substantially harder the next week. If it felt okay, then not terrible. You might bump it the following week. But you also might just run it again and see if you can get to that easier spot. This work doesn't always need to be trying to kill you. It can be challenging, and then we can coast on that a second and see exactly how we're doing. Now, finally, for all of these things, it's really valid for speed development. If you don't want to do workouts, don't, right? I have a couple things to say there, probably on the health side of things, because we do actually see a lot of long-term longevity related with higher VO2 max stuff, but you'll get a big boost in that if you're running a ridiculous amount anyway, or if you're training a ridiculous amount anyway. And if we're just doing a little bit of harder work, then that's fine. So, if you don't actually care about getting faster, then don't obsess over these things. You can just run a lot. And a lot of people do that with perfect success for what they're trying to achieve. If you do want to get faster, then we probably need some of these things and getting faster and putting in these workouts and trying to figure out how we can make progress. But if you don't care, then just do your running thing. And again, and like I said at the beginning, you should enjoy the training more than we enjoy the target. If you hate the training and dread it every week, then you're putting yourself through a bunch of torture for no real reason. And on that note, we should understand what these different adjustments do. And they're really complicated. So it's not a thing that we're going to cover in the next couple minutes of a podcast. But we can think about it and kind of figure it out, right? If we know a little bit about how these systems work, if you've been listening to me for a while and you kind of understand how some of these things go through, then we can figure out what we're training by these various adjustments. For example, if we're making it longer, we are trying to extend the time at which your body can sustain a particular effort. All right, as a famous coach, Renata Canova, said, all endurance is just extension. Most people can hold whatever pace for a certain amount of time. It's just about extending that pace or extending the ability to hold that pace. That's what we're trying to do with endurance. So if we make the interval longer, that's what we're trying to achieve there. Whereas if we do something like reduce the rest, we're trying to teach our body to recover faster, which is actually really important, right? For something like lactate work, yes, we can make less of it. That would be one way that we can get better. And that's what we would be focusing on during the actual increasing of the intensity of the on or work interval. But if we reduce the rest interval, we're teaching our body to recover faster, which is also important because part of lactate isn't just making less of it, it's also clearing it faster. So if we clear it out of our system, if we use it as the fuel that it is better, then we're also going to be able to move faster. And you can take a 30-second walk break or a 30-second hike break up a hill, and you'll be more recovered than rather than having to do a 5-minute, right? If we're doing something like incline, we're teaching our body to run uphill. We already talked about some of the benefits here, but this should be a pretty clear adaptation. Whereas if you're trying to run Chicago, maybe this isn't the one that we're going for, because Chicago's such a flat marathon course that you might use the hills a little bit here and there are good for form, etc. But I would do that more in a sprint situation, as a strides, right? Probably wouldn't be doing a lot of our intervals on the inclines because it doesn't have as much carryover to the race. So we can think about what we're trying to achieve with our training and pull these different dials a little bit, and we can adjust our workouts accordingly, see how we get there. Say you want to run like a 6-minute mile or something like that. Well, first we need to make sure that you can hit that pace for any amount of distance, right? And if we can hold that pace for a quarter mile, great. It's a minute and a half. And then we need to figure out how we're going to extend that further. And we might start with some intervals, we might start with some pace intervals, but we can improve the recovery time of like short walk breaks. And then we can push that pace up by actually increasing the intensity of the intervals itself. And then same thing with all the like cardiovascular, that would be specific to like a pace interval. And then if we talk about like all these cardiovascular systems, it's the same idea, right? Like if we crank your VO2 max to the roof, then great. We probably want to be able to do that at a faster pace. So if we want to make that a higher stimulus, then we would increase the work interval. Whereas if we are, it's a good sport. A good example of this would be like MMA fighting. They work really hard in a short bout, and then they kind of lean on each other a little bit, and they all like find spaces for rest, or there's short periods between rounds. So people who I know who have trained MMA fighters will actually focus a lot on this ability to recover quickly, because it's really important. And we can see that in running as well, especially in longer races. If you're able to take a 20-second walk break and get your heart rate to drop 30 beats, then it's a really valuable thing for your body to be able to do. So these are some ways you can program workouts. These are some ways you can progress them and figure out how to make changes depending on what you need and where you're lacking. And then we can also just make sure we're doing the workouts that are going to be the most beneficial to you. For example, at my top end speed, I am pretty fast. Not record setting by any means, but I just don't have a lot of ability to extend that and for very long. And one of the biggest deficiencies I see when I look at a lot of my data and just experientially is my VO2 max kind of sucks compared to other things, right? Like I can work at a pretty high level of lactate production for a long period of time, but there's not a lot of ceiling above that. So for me, big priority right now needs to be these like pretty short 3 to 4 minute intervals where I just feel like I'm dying, right? Like VO2 max work isn't easy. It's never going to be easy. That's kind of the point. And that's what I need to target. And we're going to work on like pushing that up a little bit. I'm doing that partially on incline because, again, I care about the cardiovascular aspect of it, not so much the actual speed. The speed is fine, but I need to actually get my cardiovascular system better on the VO2 side of things. So I'm doing VO2 work on an incline, which means less impact, less speed, less stress on the body. Most of the body, the like structural system of the body. But as much, if not more, stress on the cardiovascular system, as well as mildly improving not mildly, it's actually looking pretty good, as well as improving my ability to run up hills, which is a thing that I definitely want to do better, as I've mentioned repeatedly. So this is how we can think of workouts. This is how we can put stuff in different buckets. This is how we can make progress. This is how we can figure out what changes we might need to make. And if you have any questions, as always, you know how to reach me. Hope this was helpful. If you got something out of it, I'd appreciate you sharing it. And if you'd like to chat about your training and see if I can help, let me know. There's a bunch of ways to reach me. DM on Instagram is probably the easiest for most people. And I don't charge for consultations because, I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, I hope you have a great day, and I hope you enjoy your next run and have fun training.